My name is Amber Stone. I'm 32, a financial planner in a small Missouri town. Growing up, I was the kid who stepped up after my rock passed when I was 15. I've been the one holding my family together, paying for my mom's Christmas gift shop, my younger brother's college tuition, my older sister's lifestyle. Thousands of dollars every month straight from my pocket. But at our family's Christmas dinner last year, my mom looked me dead in the eyes and yelled, "All you do is take. You've never given this family anything." My sister chimed in, telling me to leave if I had any self-respect. I didn't scream back. I just walked out. My heart pounding, their words burning in my head. A week later, my mom called me in tears. I replied with just one short sentence, enough to leave her speechless. But that was only the beginning of what was to come. What about you? If it were you, what would you say in that moment? Share your answer in the comments. It started when I was 15, after my dad Robert passed away from a heart attack. He was my rock, taught me how to budget, how to stay strong when things got tough. His death left a hole in our family, and I decided I'd fill it no matter the cost. By 18, I was juggling 2 jobs, waitressing and tutoring, while studying finance, determined to keep my mom Elaine, my older sister Kristen, and my younger brother Tyler afloat. I didn't want Dad's memory to fade into a house full of unpaid bills. Mom runs a Christmas gift shop in our small Missouri town. It's her dream, but it's never made real money. For years, I've covered the rent, $2,000 a month, plus another $5,000 to stock it with snow globes, ornaments, and holiday knickknacks. I'd sit with Mom's ledgers, balancing her books, finding ways to stretch her budget. She never asked how I managed. She just assumed the money would come. At first, I thought I was doing right by Dad, keeping his family together. But Mom never said thank you. She'd show off the shop to customers, boasting about her hard work while I was the one keeping the lights on. Tyler, my younger brother, is 22, chasing an art degree at college. His tuition, $10,000 a year, comes straight from my savings. I've paid for his dorm, his paintbrushes, even his laptop when it broke last semester. He's got talent, but he's never worked a steady job. Once he called me at midnight asking for $500 for a special project. I sent it, even though it meant dipping into my emergency fund. When I suggested he get a part-time job, he laughed it off, said I was too uptight. Mom took his side, told me to let him find his passion. I swallowed my frustration and kept writing the checks. Kristen, my older sister, is 35, a marketing assistant who acts like she's the family's golden child. I've been covering her car payments, $400 a month, because she claims her salary doesn't stretch far enough. She lives in a sleek apartment, throws lavish parties, and buys clothes she doesn't need. Last spring, she asked for $1,500 to get through a rough patch. I sent it, even though I had to cancel my own plans for a weekend getaway. She never mentioned paying me back, just posted photos from a trip to Miami, all smiles and cocktails. Mom would beam, calling Kristen our star, while I sat there feeling like a bank account with legs. It wasn't just the money that hurt. It was how they treated me. At family gatherings, Mom would rave about Kristen's latest social media campaign or Tyler's abstract paintings, while my work helping families in town plan their retirements got nothing but blank stares. Once I mentioned how much I was juggling, how the shop's rent was eating into my savings. Mom cut me off, said I was doing fine and shouldn't make it about myself. Kristen smirked, muttered I was always whining. Tyler just scrolled his phone, ignoring me. I'd leave those dinners feeling smaller, like my efforts didn't matter. The worst was when they compared me to Kristen. Mom would say things like, "If only you had Kristen's charm," or "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Kristen would laugh, toss her hair, and say I was too boring with my spreadsheets and budgets. Tyler joined in, once saying I should lighten up and stop acting like the family accountant. I wanted to scream that I was the reason they had a roof, a shop, a college degree in progress, but I didn't. I kept quiet, kept paying, kept hoping they'd see me one day. It started to wear me down. I'd lie awake at night wondering why I was killing myself for people who didn't care. Dad's voice would echo in my head, his lessons about responsibility, about family. He'd been the one to hold us together, to make me feel seen. Without him, I felt like I was carrying his burden, trying to be the glue for a family that didn't even notice I was cracking. I'd look at my bank statement, see the thousands I'd sent to Mom, Tyler, Kristen, and feel a knot in my stomach. I was 32 with no savings for myself, no life of my own, just a family that took and took. Last summer, I hit a breaking point. I told Mom I might need to cut back on the shop's rent. Business was slow, and my clients were struggling too. She didn't even look at me, just said, "Figure it out, Amber. You always do." Kristen overheard, laughed, and said I was too cheap to help family. Tyler texted me later asking for another $200 for art supplies, like nothing had happened. I sent the money, but something in me shifted. I started to see them for what they were. People who'd never stop taking, who'd never see me as more than a paycheck. I didn't know it then, but that moment planted a seed, one that would grow into something I never expected. I had spent weeks planning the Christmas dinner, hoping this year would be different. That day, my mom's house was packed with family, neighbors, and customers from her Christmas gift shop. I'd cooked the turkey, set the table, even bought the wine, everything to make it perfect. For once, I thought maybe they'd see me, not just the money I sent every month. But as the evening wore on, that hope started to crumble. The dining room was crowded, plates piled high with mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce. Mom was at the head of the table, laughing with her friends about her shop's record sales. Kristen was showing off her new phone, bragging about a work project she'd barely started. Tyler was sketching on a napkin, ignoring everyone. I sat quietly, passing the gravy, trying to join the conversation. Then Mom turned to me, her smile fading. "Amber," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the chatter, "you didn't chip in for the decorations this year. You're always so stingy with the family." The room went quiet. I froze my fork halfway to my mouth. Stingy? I'd paid thousands to keep her shop running, her house standing, her kids fed. Before I could respond, Kristen leaned forward, her eyes glinting. "Honestly, Amber, you're so selfish sometimes. All you do is take. You've never contributed anything real to this family." Her words hit like a slap, echoing Mom's accusation. I looked at Tyler, hoping for a glance of support. He just shrugged, kept sketching like I wasn't even there. My heart pounded, a mix of anger and hurt. I wanted to scream, list every dollar I'd poured into their lives, every sacrifice I'd made since Dad died, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I felt the weight of every ignored effort, every silent dinner crushing me. Mom wasn't done. She leaned closer, her voice louder now. "You sit there acting like you're above us, but you've never done anything to make this family proud." The neighbors shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Kristen smirked, adding, "If you had any self-respect, you'd just leave. Stop dragging us down." I felt my face burn, my hands trembling. I looked around the table, Mom's accusing stare, Kristen's smug grin, Tyler's indifference. This was the family I'd given everything for, the ones I'd stayed up nights worrying about, balancing their budgets while mine dwindled. I thought of Dad, how he'd always made me feel seen, how he'd never let this happen. But he was gone, and I was alone in a room full of people. I pushed my chair back, the scrape loud in the silence. "I'm done," I said, my voice low but steady. No one stopped me. Mom rolled her eyes, muttered something about me being dramatic. Kristen laughed, said good riddance. Tyler didn't even look up. I grabbed my coat and walked out, the cold Missouri air hitting my face like a wake-up call. My car was parked down the street, and I sat there for a moment, staring at the house I'd paid for, the lights I'd funded, the family that didn't want me. The morning after I walked out of Mom's Christmas dinner, I sat at my kitchen table, coffee gone cold, and made a decision that felt like waking up from a long sleep. I was done being their safety net. I started with the bank. I'd been sending automatic payments every month to cover the rent for Mom's house, keeping a roof over her head. I called and canceled the transfers, my voice calm, but my heart pounding. The bank rep asked if I was sure. I didn't hesitate. "Yes." Next, I reached out to the property manager for Mom's Christmas gift shop. My name was on the lease as the guarantor, and I'd been funneling thousands to keep it stocked with holiday trinkets. I told them I was done. The manager sounded stunned, said they'd notify Mom soon. I hung up, feeling a weight lift, like I was finally standing up straight. Then there was Tyler's college tuition. I'd been covering his classes, his dorm, everything, so he could chase his art degree without a care. I logged into the university's payment portal and removed my card. The next tuition deadline was coming up, and without my money, Tyler would get a wake-up call. It didn't feel cruel. It felt fair. I wasn't his bank anymore. Kristen was next. Her car payments had been coming out of my account for years, ever since she claimed she couldn't afford them. I called the finance company and stopped the auto pay. She'd get a bill soon, and she'd have to deal with it. For the first time, I wasn't worried about their reactions. I was setting myself free. It didn't take long for the fallout to start. A couple of days after the dinner, Mom called, her voice sharp and panicked. "The landlord says the rent didn't go through. What did you do?" I let it go to voicemail. She called again, leaving messages that got angrier each time. "This is your fault, Amber. You know we need that money." I didn't reply, just deleted the messages and moved on. A few days later, the gift shop's property manager reached out to Mom. She texted me, her words frantic. "They're saying we might lose the shop. You need to fix this." I didn't respond. The shop was her dream, but it had been my money keeping it alive. Stocking shelves, paying suppliers, covering rent. Without me, it was crumbling, and fast. By the following week, suppliers stopped delivering and Mom got a notice: pay up or close the doors. Tyler caught on around the same time. His university sent him a warning about his unpaid tuition. He called me, sounding more annoyed than scared. "Hey, the school's saying I owe money. You didn't pay. What's your problem?" I didn't pick up. A second email from the school warned he'd be dropped from his classes if the balance wasn't cleared soon. Tyler texted again, all caps, "You're messing up my life. Fix it." I left him on read. He'd skated by for years, now he'd have to figure it out. Kristen took the longest to notice. About a week after the dinner, she called, her tone dripping with irritation. "My car payment didn't go through. You stopped it." "Are you kidding me?" She didn't wait for an answer, just kept going. "You're so selfish, Amber. Always making things harder for us." I let it go to voicemail. The finance company followed up with a late notice warning her about repossession. She sent me a screenshot adding, "You're ruining everything. Thanks a lot." I didn't budge. Their reactions didn't surprise me. They didn't ask why I'd stopped. Didn't pause to think about what they'd said at the dinner. They just blamed me, like always expecting me to jump back in and save them. I thought of Dad, how he'd taught me family was about balance, give and take. I'd given everything, my savings, my time, my dreams, and they'd taken it all, offering nothing but complaints. Their anger only proved I'd made the right call. I needed to talk to someone, so I called my best friend Holly. I hadn't told her about the dinner, but I needed to let it out. Over coffee, I spilled everything, not just their words, but the years of carrying their weight. Holly didn't hold back. "They've been using you, Amber," she said, her voice firm. "You don't owe them your life." Her words cut deep, but they rang true. I wasn't the bad guy, no matter how much they tried to paint me as one. By the next week, the consequences were hitting hard. Mom's shop was on the brink, with suppliers pulling back and customers noticing empty shelves. Tyler was scrambling, looking for loans to cover his tuition, but coming up short. Kristen was dodging calls from the finance company, her social media full of complaints about hard times. My phone kept buzzing with their messages, anger pleas, accusations, but I stayed firm. I'd spent too long being their fallback. Now they'd have to face the mess they'd made. As the dust settled from my decision to stop paying for everything, my phone became a battlefield. Mom, Kristen, and Tyler didn't take long to realize their world was unraveling, and they made sure I knew who they blamed. It started with calls, Endless calls, each one sharper than the last, piling on guilt like I'd burn their lives to the ground. But it was Kristen's move online that turned things uglier, and it was Holly who helped me fight back. Mom was the first to come at me. A few days after the notices hit, she called, her voice trembling with rage. "How could you do this to us, Amber? The shop's falling apart. The landlord's breathing down my neck, and you're just sitting there." She didn't ask why I'd stopped. Didn't mention the dinner where she'd called me selfish. It was all my fault. Like always. I let her voicemails stack up, each one a mix of accusations and pleas. "You're tearing this family apart," she said in one, her tone breaking. "Fix it, Amber. You owe us that much." I didn't owe her anything, not anymore. But her words still stung like a knife twisting in an old wound. Tyler was next, blowing up my phone with texts that swung between anger and desperation. "The school's gonna kick me out." He wrote his words sloppy and rushed. "You couldn't just pay the tuition? You're ruining my future." He called me selfish, said I was punishing him for no reason. I stared at his messages, remembering how he'd shrugged at the dinner, too busy sketching to care. He'd never once thanked me for keeping him in college, never asked how I managed. Now, with his art degree on the line, he was suddenly full of opinions about my choices. I didn't reply, but each text felt like a punch testing my resolve. Kristen, though, took it to another level. About a week after her car payment bounced, she called, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you're so high and mighty, Amber, cutting us off like this? You're nothing but a petty control freak." She didn't stop there. She went online, posting on social media for the whole town to see. Her post was a masterpiece of lies, painting me as the greedy sister who'd abandoned her family, who'd let Mom's shop fail, and Tyler's dreams crash. "Some people only care about themselves," she wrote, tagging me so everyone knew who she meant. She added a photo of herself looking sad, standing outside Mom's shop with a caption about family betrayal. The post spread like wildfire, racking up likes and comments from people who didn't know the half of it. "How could you do this to your mom?" one stranger wrote. "You're heartless," said another. I saw the post late one night, scrolling through my phone, my stomach sinking. The comments piled up, neighbors, old classmates, even people I'd helped with their finances, all chiming in to call me out. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. I'd spent years keeping this family together, and now I was the villain in their story. I thought of Dad, how he'd always said to hold my head high, but this felt like drowning. I almost called Kristen to defend myself, to list every dollar I'd poured into their lives, but I stopped. I wasn't going to beg for their approval, not anymore. That's when Holly stepped in. My best friend Holly had been my rock since we were kids, the one person who saw through my family's nonsense. I'd told her about the dinner, about cutting them off, and she'd been furious on my behalf. When she saw Kristen's post, she didn't hesitate. She wrote her own post, laying out the truth in a way I never could. For years, Amber paid for her mom's shop, her brother's college, her sister's car, thousands every month with no thanks, she wrote. She gave everything, and they called her selfish. Now she's standing up for herself, and they're twisting it to play the victim. Holly tagged Kristen, Mom, and Tyler, making sure the town saw the other side. She included screenshots of my bank transfers, blurred for privacy but clear enough to show the money I'd sent over the years. Holly's post hit hard. People started commenting, shocked, some even apologizing for jumping to conclusions. A few of Mom's customers messaged me directly, saying they had no idea how much I'd done. One wrote, "Your mom always made it sound like she was doing it all herself." The tide was turning, but Kristen doubled down. She replied to Holly's post, calling me a liar, saying I'd exaggerated my help to make her look bad. Tyler chimed in, commenting, "Amber's always been jealous of us. She's just causing drama." Mom stayed quiet online, but she called again, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "This is getting out of hand, Amber. Let's talk, please." I didn't pick up. Their words online and off were just noise, now trying to pull me back into their chaos. Holly wasn't done. She called me the next day, fired up. "You're not letting them win this, Amber," she said. They've been dragging your name through the mud, but the truth's out there now. She was right. Her post had shifted things, made people question Kristen's story. I felt a flicker of hope, not because the town's opinion mattered, but because I wasn't alone. Holly had my back, and that was enough to keep me standing. A few weeks after the social media storm, I found myself sitting in a quiet office staring at a stack of papers that held the key to my freedom. Holly had pushed me to meet with a lawyer, insisting I needed to protect myself from my family's chaos. She was right. The calls, the texts, Kristen's posts, they were all trying to drag me back into their mess, but I was done playing their game. Today, I was meeting my family at the office of my lawyer David to take back control of Mom's Christmas gift shop, the one I'd been bankrolling for years. I arrived early, my stomach in knots, but my resolve firm. David, a calm man with sharp eyes and a knack for cutting through nonsense, had reviewed the shop's lease. My name was on it as the guarantor, a detail Mom had conveniently ignored when she claimed the shop as her own. David laid it out plain: I had the legal right to take control, to decide its fate. I didn't want to run a gift shop, but I wasn't going to let Mom keep using my name and my money without a say. Mom, Kristen, and Tyler walked in together, their faces a mix of anger and desperation. Mom's eyes were red like she'd been crying, but her jaw was set ready for a fight. Kristen stood tall, arms crossed, her glare sharp enough to cut glass. Tyler slouched, avoiding my gaze, his usual indifference replaced by something heavier, maybe fear. David greeted them politely, offered coffee, but they just sat down staring at me like I was the enemy. Mom spoke first, her voice low but shaking. "Amber, this has gone too far. You're destroying everything I've built. The shop's all I have. How could you let it fall apart?" She leaned forward, hands clasped like she could will me back to the old days when I'd fix everything with a check. I didn't flinch. Her words hurt, but I'd heard them before, blame dressed up as pain. Kristen jumped in, her tone biting. "You think you're some hero, don't you? Taking over the shop, acting like you're better than us? You're just selfish. Amber always have been." She flipped her hair, a move I'd seen 1,000 times, meant to dismiss me. Her words echoed her online posts, but face to face they landed differently, heavier, meaner. I clenched my fists under the table, keeping my face steady. Tyler finally looked up, his voice quieter but no less accusing. "You know I'm gonna get kicked out of school because of you. My whole future's on the line and you don't even care." He sounded like a kid caught in a lie, not the brother I'd supported for years. I wanted to remind him of every tuition payment, every late-night call for just a few hundred, but I held back. This wasn't about proving myself anymore. David cleared his throat, sliding the lease across the table. "Let's focus on the facts," he said, his voice even. "Amber's name is on the lease as the guarantor. She's been paying the rent and operational costs for years. Legally, she has the right to assume control of the shop or walk away entirely." He looked at Mom, calm but firm. "Elaine, you've been running the business, but Amber's been funding it. Without her, there is no shop." Mom's face crumpled, but she didn't argue. Kristen, though, wasn't having it. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, pointing at me. "You can't just take Mom's shop. It's her life's work. You're stealing it." Her voice rose, and David raised a hand, cutting her off. "It's not stealing," he said. "It's Amber's legal right. She's been carrying the financial burden. The question is what happens next." I took a deep breath, meeting their eyes one by one. "I'm not here to steal anything," I said, my voice steady. "But I'm done letting you use me. I've paid for the shop, the house, Tyler's school, Kristen's car, everything. And all I got was blame. I'm taking control of the shop because my name's on the line, and I'm not letting it drag me down anymore." Mom's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were real or a tactic. "Amber, please," she said, her voice breaking. "We're family. We can work this out. Just pay the rent one more time, keep the shop open. I'll make it right, I promise." It was the closest she'd ever come to an apology, but it wasn't enough. I'd heard promises before, empty ones that left me emptier. Kristen leaned forward, her tone softer now, like she was trying a new angle. Look, Amber, we all got heated at Christmas. Let's move past it. You don't want the shop, let Mom keep it. We'll figure out the money. Her words were smooth, but her eyes were cold, calculating. I knew her game. She wanted me to back down to keep paying to stay the family's doormat. Tyler chimed in, his voice pleading. Yeah, Amber, come on. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean to take you for granted. Just help me with school, and I'll get a job, I swear. He looked genuine for once, but I'd heard I'll get a job too many times. It was always the same promises they never kept. I shook my head, my heart heavy, but my mind clear. I've given you years of chances, I said. I'm not doing it anymore. The shop's in my name, and I'm deciding what happens to it. You want to save it? Figure it out without me. David nodded, sliding a document toward them, a transfer agreement that would put the lease in Mom's name if she could cover the costs. She couldn't, and we all knew it. Mom stood up, her chair scraping the floor. You're not my daughter, she said, her voice low and final. You're breaking this family apart. Kristen grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door, but not before shooting me a look that promised this wasn't over. Tyler followed, head down, saying nothing. They left, and the room felt quieter, heavier, like the air after a storm. David leaned back, giving me a small smile. You did well, he said. You stood your ground. I nodded, but I didn't feel victorious. I felt like I'd lost something, maybe the last piece of hope that my family could change. I thought of Dad, how he'd taught me to stand up for what's right, even when it hurts. This hurt, but it also felt like freedom. I left David's office with the papers signed, officially taking control of the shop. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it. Sell it, lease it out, or let it close. But it was my choice now. For the first time, I wasn't carrying their weight. Whatever came next, I'd face it on my terms. Months after walking out of David's office with the shop's future in my hands, I stood at a crossroads I never imagined I'd reach. The weight of my family's expectations was gone, but so was the hope I'd held for years that they'd change. I'd taken back control not just of the shop, but of my life, and now I was ready to let go of the past entirely. What came next wasn't about them anymore. It was about me and the kind of life I wanted to build. The gift shop closed for good not long after our meeting with David. Without my money to keep it afloat, the shelves stayed bare and the landlord locked the doors. Mom didn't have the funds to take over the lease, and no amount of pleading could change that. I heard through Holly that Mom had tried to rally her customers to save the shop, but it was too late. The trinkets and holiday decorations she'd been so proud of were packed away, the sign above the door taken down. I didn't feel joy watching her dream fade, but I didn't feel guilt either. I'd carried it as long as I could. Tyler's college sent him packing around the same time. Without my tuition payments, he couldn't clear his balance, and the university dropped him from his classes. He'd been so sure I'd swoop in to save him, but when I didn't, he was left scrambling. Holly told me he'd moved back to town, crashing with friends, talking big about starting over but doing little to make it happen. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed up balancing his bills with mine and wondered why I'd ever thought he'd thank me. He didn't, and now he was learning what it meant to stand on his own. The house was the final blow for them. Mom couldn't cover the rent once my payments stopped, and the landlord wasn't in the mood for excuses. They were given notice to vacate, and by that winter they'd moved out. I didn't know where they went, maybe to a smaller place, maybe out of town. Kristen had been posting less online, her usual bravado replaced by vague complaints about hard times. Mom's calls had stopped, and Tyler's texts dried up. The silence was heavy, but it was also a relief. I'd spent years tethered to their chaos, and now that tether was cut. I could have stopped there, let the pieces fall and walked away. But I wanted more than just freedom from them. I wanted purpose. That's when I turned to something I'd never had time for before giving back. I'd always loved the idea of Christmas as a time for kindness, not just gifts, and I decided to put my energy there. I reached out to a local charity that ran a holiday program for families in need, food drives, toy donations, warm clothes for kids. I started small volunteering at their events, helping sort donations. But as I got more involved, I saw a chance to do something bigger. With the money I was no longer sending to my family, I invested in the charity's Christmas outreach. I funded a community dinner, the kind where everyone's welcome, no questions asked. I worked with the organizers to expand their toy drive, making sure kids in our town woke up to something special under their trees. It wasn't about being a hero, it was about creating the kind of warmth I'd always wanted from my own family but never got. The first time I saw a kid light up over a new jacket, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. This was what my money was meant for, not propping up people who'd never see my worth. Holly was right there with me, rolling up her sleeves at every event. She'd been my anchor through it all, the one who'd called out my family's lies and pushed me to keep going. Over coffee one afternoon, she grinned and said, "You're building something real here, Amber. They tried to tear you down, but look at you now." Her words hit deep, not because they were new, but because I finally believed them. I wasn't the selfish daughter or the jealous sister they'd painted me as. I was just me finding my way. Cutting ties with my family wasn't easy even after everything. I stopped answering their occasional messages, blocked their numbers, let go of the guilt that tried to creep back in. I didn't hate them. I just couldn't carry them anymore. Mom's voice still echoed sometimes, calling me heartless, but I drowned it out with the laughter at the charity dinners, the thank yous from strangers who didn't owe me anything. I thought of Dad often, how he'd taught me to value myself, to know when to walk away. He'd be proud, I think, seeing me finally live for myself. The lesson wasn't about winning or losing, it was about respect. For years, I'd given everything to people who didn't respect me, hoping they'd change. But respect starts within, with knowing your worth, and drawing a line when it's crossed. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was survival. I'd spent too long bending over backward thinking love meant saying yes to everything. Now I knew better. Love meant saying no when it mattered, even when it hurt. That winter, as I stood in the community center watching families share a meal I'd helped make possible, I felt free. Not the kind of free that comes from running away, but the kind that comes from standing firm. My family's house was gone, their shop shuttered, their lives upended, but I wasn't carrying that weight anymore. I was building something new, something mine, and for the first time, I wasn't looking back.
"You're not going to leave her alone," I shouted into my phone, my voice cracking with panic. My heart was racing so fast I could barely breathe. The hospital room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in as I heard my daughter Melody's terrified voice just moments earlier. "Mommy, Grandma, and Grandpa just drove away. I'm here alone," she had sobbed through the phone. "They said they're going to Uncle Peter's party and that I'm old enough to stay by myself. I'm scared." My name is Christina Harper, Tina to everyone who knows me. And I'm a 36-year-old widow trying my best to raise my 10-year-old daughter after losing my husband Michael to a car accident 3 years ago. Melody has struggled with anxiety since her father's death, sometimes waking up with nightmares, worried something might happen to me too. Now, my in-laws had confirmed her worst fears by abandoning her when she needed protection most. "Tina, you're overreacting," my father-in-law Gerald huffed through the phone. "She needs to toughen up. She's not a baby anymore. We'll be back in a few hours." "A few hours?" I nearly screamed. "She's 10. It's illegal to leave a child that age alone. Get back to my house immediately." "We're already halfway to Peter's," my mother-in-law Barbara chimed in. "It's his 60th birthday and the whole family will be there. Melody was invited too, but she didn't want to come. That's her choice." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Here I was, stuck in the hospital after an emergency gallbladder surgery, unable to leave, and they had abandoned my child, their only granddaughter, because a party was more important. "I'm calling my neighbor Janet right now to check on Melody," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "And when I get out of here tomorrow, you will never have unsupervised access to my daughter again." "You're being dramatic as usual, Tina," Barbara said dismissively. "Michael would have understood. You're the one who's making her soft." Using my late husband against me was the final straw. This conversation is over. Stay away from my house. I hung up and immediately called Janet, who lived across the street. Thank God she answered right away and promised to go check on Melody immediately. As I hung up, trembling with anger and fear, I knew this was just the beginning. Something felt horribly wrong in my chest, not from the surgery, but from this deep betrayal by the people who were supposed to help protect what matters most to me. Michael's parents had always undercut my parenting, but this crossed an unforgivable line. Growing up without consistent guidance, I promised myself I'd be different with my own family. Michael and I met in college. He was studying engineering while I pursued a degree in education. We had Melody when I was 26, and we were blissfully happy building our lives together. But Barbara and Gerald never quite approved of me. They thought their son had married beneath him, and they made subtle comments about how I kept house or parented Melody. Michael always defended me, acting as the buffer between us. But after he died, that thin shield disappeared. The tension had been building for years. Every family gathering became a minefield of passive-aggressive comments and unsolicited advice. "She's too attached to you, Tina," Barbara would say while Melody clung to my leg. Michael was never like that with me. "That's because we taught him independence early," Gerald would add. "You're making her weak." I tried to maintain a relationship between them and Melody despite these challenges. They were her only connection to her father, and I believed having grandparents in her life was important. So I swallowed my pride, nodded along to their critiques, and kept the peace for Melody's sake. 3 days ago, I woke up with excruciating abdominal pain. After rushing to the ER, doctors diagnosed me with acute cholecystitis. My gallbladder needed to come out immediately. Panicked about Melody, I called everyone I knew, but my closest friends were out of town, and Janet could only help part-time due to her work schedule. In desperation, I called Barbara and Gerald. They agreed to stay at our house for the 3 days I'd be hospitalized, seemingly happy to help. Relief washed over me as I went into surgery, believing Melody would be cared for. I even felt guilty for my years of keeping them at arm's length. "See, Tina. Family is what matters in a crisis," Barbara had said while packing an overnight bag for my hospital stay. "We may have our differences, but we're here when it counts." I believed her. I trusted them with the most precious person in my world. Yesterday, I had called to check in and everything seemed fine. Melody sounded a bit quiet, but I assumed it was just her missing me. There was no hint that today they would decide my daughter, their granddaughter, was an inconvenience they could abandon for a party. Now, as I waited for Janet to call back, I realized this wasn't just a one-time lapse in judgment. This was who they truly were, and I had been blind to the danger. Janet called back 10 minutes later. "I'm with Melody now," she reassured me. "She's upset, but okay. I've brought her to my house, and she's having cookies with my son. I can keep her until you're discharged tomorrow." Relief flooded through me. "Janet, I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me," she said firmly. "What they did was child abandonment. Tina, you need to report this." I hesitated. They're her grandparents, Michael's parents. And they left a 10-year-old child alone in a house, for a party. Janet's voice hardened. "You had emergency surgery. What if there had been complications? What if you couldn't come home tomorrow?" She was right. The reality of what could have happened hit me like a physical blow. What if there had been a fire? What if Melody had been injured? What if someone had broken in? That evening, I made a difficult call to Child Protective Services from my hospital bed. The social worker's voice was kind but serious as she took down my statement. She explained this wasn't just a family disagreement, it was a clear case of child endangerment. "We'll need to investigate and document this incident," she explained. "Abandoning a child that age is considered neglect under state law." As I hung up, my phone immediately rang again. It was Gerald. "What the hell, Tina?" "We just got a call from some government agency saying they need to interview us about Melody. What did you tell them?" "The truth. I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. That you abandoned my daughter to go to a party while I was in the hospital. It was a family gathering, not some wild party, and she was perfectly safe. She was terrified, Gerald. She's been having anxiety since her father, your son, died, and you left her alone. This is ridiculous, he shouted. We're her grandparents. We have rights. Something in me snapped. Rights? You think leaving a child alone gives you rights? You have responsibilities, Gerald, which you completely abandoned, just like you abandoned Melody. Barbara's crying because of what you've done, he said, trying to make me feel guilty. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done besides criticize and undermine me since Michael died? My voice was shaking now, but with anger rather than fear. Tell Barbara I'm sorry she's upset, but I'm more concerned about my traumatized daughter. I'll be home tomorrow, and I don't want either of you at my house. You can't keep us from seeing Melody, he thundered. Watch me, I replied, and hung up. That night, my hospital room felt cold and empty. I stared at the ceiling, second-guessing myself, wondering if I'd overreacted. But every time I closed my eyes, I heard Melody's frightened voice. Mommy, I'm here alone. No, I hadn't overreacted. If anything, I had been too tolerant for too long. The hospital discharged me the next morning. Janet picked me up and filled me in on Melody's night as we drove home. She had trouble sleeping, Janet said quietly. Kept asking if you were really coming home today. My heart ached. Did she say anything else about what happened? Janet hesitated. She mentioned this wasn't the first time they'd left her alone. I nearly choked. What? Apparently, they went grocery shopping yesterday and left her home for about an hour. She didn't call you because they told her not to bother you while you were recovering. White-hot anger surged through me. They had abandoned her twice and manipulated her into keeping quiet about it? When we arrived at Janet's house, Melody flew into my arms, clinging to me like she used to after Michael died. Mommy, you're back, she sobbed into my shoulder. I'm here, sweetie, I whispered, fighting through the pain of my surgical incision to hold her tight. I'm so sorry about what happened. Later that afternoon, after settling back into our home, I changed the codes on our electronic door locks. I was still moving slowly from surgery, but determination pushed me forward as I called a locksmith to change the physical locks as well. Melody watched me with wide eyes. Are Grandma and Grandpa coming back? She asked quietly. I sat beside her on the couch, choosing my words carefully. Not for a while, honey. What they did was wrong and dangerous. They said I was being a baby, Melody whispered. Grandpa said Daddy wouldn't be proud of me being so scared. Fury rose in my throat. Using Michael against our daughter was unforgivable. Your daddy would be incredibly proud of you, I said firmly. You were brave to call me when you felt unsafe. That was exactly the right thing to do. By evening, my phone was buzzing constantly with texts and calls from Gerald, Barbara, and even Michael's brother Peter. I finally answered Peter's call. Tina, you need to calm down, he started. Mom and Dad are beside themselves. They're saying you reported them to child services and changed the locks? They abandoned my daughter, Peter, twice. My voice was ice. They left a 10-year-old alone to attend your birthday party. Look, they made a mistake. A mistake? I interrupted. A mistake is forgetting to pick someone up from soccer practice. Deliberately leaving a child alone after being trusted with her care is a choice. They're family, Tina. Melody's grandparents. Being family doesn't give them the right to endanger my child, I replied. Would you leave your kids alone at that age? His silence was telling. That's what I thought, I continued. I've filed a formal report, and yes, I've changed the locks. They're not welcome in my home until they acknowledge what they did and take steps to earn back my trust. After hanging up, I found 3 voicemails from Barbara, each progressively more hostile. Tina, this is absurd. Gerald and I have never done anything but love Melody. the first one began. The second, "You're turning our granddaughter against us. Michael would be horrified by your behavior." And the third, left just minutes ago. "We're consulting with a lawyer about grandparents' rights. You can't keep us from seeing Melody. You've gone too far this time." I deleted them all, hands shaking. I knew the threat about grandparents' rights might not be empty. They had the resources for legal action. But I also knew I had documentation of their neglect, and protecting Melody was worth whatever battle lay ahead. As I tucked Melody into bed that night, she looked up at me with teary eyes. "Am I in trouble with Grandma and Grandpa?" "No, sweetheart," I assured her. "They're the ones who made a bad choice, not you. You're safe now." But as I kissed her goodnight, I wondered if any of us were truly safe from what was coming next. The next morning, I received an email from CPS confirming they'd opened an investigation. The social worker, Ms. Patterson, would be interviewing all parties involved, starting with a home visit that afternoon. The email also included resources about child safety and family counseling. I was walking Melody to the bus stop when my phone rang again. Barbara's number. I declined the call, but a text followed immediately. "We're coming over at noon to talk. This has gone far enough." My hands trembled as I texted back. "Do not come to my house. I will call the police if you show up uninvited." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again before her response came through. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," I wrote back. After seeing Melody safely onto the school bus, I called the non-emergency police line to report potential unwanted visitors. The officer was sympathetic, especially when I explained the CPS investigation, and promised to have a patrol car drive by around noon. At 11:55, true to their word, Gerald's SUV pulled into my driveway. I watched through the front window as they marched up to my door, Barbara's face set in determination, Gerald's in anger. When they found their key wouldn't work in the new lock, Barbara rang the doorbell repeatedly while Gerald pounded on the door. I didn't open it. Instead, I spoke through the video doorbell. "I told you not to come. Please leave my property." "This is ridiculous," Gerald shouted at the camera. "We have a right to see our granddaughter." "Your granddaughter is at school, and you have no right to be on my property after I've asked you to leave. The police have been notified." As if on cue, a patrol car pulled up. The officer approached calmly, speaking to Gerald and Barbara while I watched through the window. Gerald's face grew redder as he gestured wildly toward my house. Eventually, they got back in their SUV and left with one final glare toward my door. The officer knocked gently. "Ms. Harper, they're gone now. Would you like to make a formal statement about the situation?" I invited him in and explained everything. The abandonment, the CPS report, and their showing up despite my explicit request not to come. He took notes and assured me they wouldn't be back today, but suggested I might want to consider a temporary restraining order if the harassment continued. After he left, I sat on my couch, physically and emotionally drained. The site of my surgery throbbed, and I realized I hadn't taken my pain medication that morning amidst all the chaos. My phone rang again. This time it was Peter's wife, Jessica. "Tina, what's going on? Mom and Dad just called Peter in tears saying the police escorted them away from your house." I sighed. "They showed up uninvited after I explicitly told them not to come. The police simply asked them to leave." "Don't you think you're taking this too far?" Jessica asked. "They made a mistake, but—" "A mistake that endangered my child," I interrupted. "Would you have left your sons alone at 10 years old?" Jessica hesitated. "Well, no, but—" "Then please don't ask me to accept what you wouldn't tolerate for your own children." After hanging up, I logged onto Facebook to find my notifications exploding. Barbara had posted a long, self-pitying message about being kept from our precious granddaughter and falsely accused of neglect. She'd tagged several family members who were now commenting with confusion and concern. I felt physically ill reading her public distortion of events. But among the sympathetic comments for Barbara were a few questioning responses. "Wait, did you really leave Melody alone while Tina was in the hospital?" That doesn't sound right. Weren't you at Peter's party that night? Was Melody there too? The truth was starting to emerge, despite their attempts to control the narrative. A major plot twist was unfolding that I hadn't anticipated. The family was beginning to question their version of events. 3 days later, Ms. Patterson from CPS sat in my living room, finishing her interview with me while Melody was at school. Based on our investigation so far, including our conversations with your in-laws, there's sufficient evidence to support your claim of child neglect, she said, reviewing her notes. Your daughter has confirmed being left alone on 2 occasions, and your in-laws have admitted to leaving her, though they insist it wasn't for long, and that she was perfectly safe. What happens now? I asked, relief mingling with anxiety. We'll complete our report next week. While this doesn't rise to the level of criminal charges, it will be on record should any future incidents occur. She paused, looking at me carefully. Have you considered family counseling? It might help establish boundaries if you plan to allow them back into your lives eventually. I'm not sure I do, I admitted. Or at least, not in the same way. After she left, I checked my email to find a message from a lawyer I didn't recognize. The subject line made my blood run cold. Representation for Gerald and Barbara Miller, grandparent visitation rights. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was formally worded but clear. Gerald and Barbara had retained counsel to pursue legal visitation rights with Melody. It cited their close and meaningful relationship with their granddaughter and claimed I was alienating them without just cause. Without just cause? My surgical incision still hurt when I moved too quickly, a constant reminder of the moment my in-laws had chosen a party over my daughter's safety. I forwarded the email to my friend Elaine, who was an attorney, asking for her advice. She called me within minutes. First, don't panic, she said. Second, they're overplaying their hand. Grandparents' rights cases are notoriously difficult to win, especially with an active CPS finding of neglect. I'd be happy to represent you if it comes to that. Thank you, I said, my voice breaking. I just don't understand how they've twisted this around so completely. They're acting like they're the victims. People who can't accept responsibility often flip the narrative, Elaine explained. But the facts are on your side, Tina. That evening, as Melody and I were eating dinner, the doorbell rang. I checked the video feed to see Peter standing there alone, looking uncomfortable. I hesitated, then opened the door. Can we talk? He asked quietly. I let him in, keeping Melody in my sight in the dining room. I spoke with Jessica's sister, he began, sitting stiffly on the edge of my couch. She's a child psychologist. She said what Mom and Dad did was absolutely inappropriate and potentially traumatic for Melody. He ran a hand through his hair. I didn't want to believe they would do something so irresponsible. I didn't either, I said softly. That's why I trusted them with her care. Peter looked genuinely troubled. I had no idea Melody was alone when they came to my party. They told everyone you'd arranged alternative care, and that's why she wasn't with them. This new revelation stunned me. They lied to the entire family? I'm afraid so. He looked toward Melody, who was watching us cautiously from the dining room. May I speak with her? I'd like to apologize for not checking on her myself. I nodded, and Peter spent a few minutes talking gently with Melody, who gradually relaxed as they spoke. Before leaving, he turned to me again. I've told Mom and Dad to drop the legal threats. Jessica and I won't support them if they continue this way. His expression was grave. Michael wouldn't have stood for this, and neither should we. As I closed the door behind him, I felt a surprising lightness. The family alliance I'd feared was fracturing, not because of my actions, but because the truth was finally emerging. That night, I received a text from Barbara. We need to talk, without lawyers. It seemed the next phase of this conflict was about to begin, but for the first time, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. 1 week later, I sat in my living room across from Gerald and Barbara. Elaine, my attorney friend, sat beside me, while their lawyer, a stern-looking man named Mr. Bradshaw, flanked them. Between us on the coffee table was a formal agreement that had taken days to negotiate. Barbara hadn't spoken directly to me since entering my home, her eyes red-rimmed but defiant. Gerald looked aged somehow, the confidence that had always characterized him notably diminished. "Let's review the terms one final time," Elaine said professionally. The Millers acknowledge their lapse in judgment in leaving Melody unattended. They agree to complete 6 sessions of a grandparenting education program and 3 family therapy sessions before resuming unsupervised visits with Melody. Mr. Bradshaw nodded stiffly. "And Ms. Harper agrees to dismiss the CPS complaint and permit supervised visitation in the interim, starting with 2 hours twice monthly at neutral locations." "Those are the terms," I confirmed, looking directly at my in-laws. "This isn't about punishment. It's about Melody's safety and ensuring nothing like this happens again." Gerald cleared his throat. "We still think this has been blown out of proportion, but we'll sign." As they scrawled their signatures on the document, I felt no triumph or satisfaction, just relief that the battle was ending and hope that healing could begin. After they left, I found Melody sitting on her bed, clutching the photo of Michael that she kept on her nightstand. "Are Grandma and Grandpa still mad at me?" she asked in a small voice. I sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "They were never really mad at you, sweetheart. They're sad about the situation, but we're all going to work together to make things better." "Will I see them again?" "Yes," I assured her. "But things will be a little different for a while. We're setting up some new rules to make sure everyone feels safe and respected." 3 months later, I sat on a bench at the park, watching as Melody showed Gerald how to use the tablet she'd gotten for her birthday. Barbara sat nearby, actually listening as Melody explained a game she enjoyed. Peter and Jessica's sons played on the swings, occasionally calling for Melody to join them. The family therapy sessions had been difficult but necessary. Gerald and Barbara had initially been defensive, but the therapist skillfully guided us through conversations about boundaries, respect, and the trauma Michael's death had caused all of us. The grandparenting classes had made an even more profound impact. Barbara admitted during our last therapy session that they had been parenting Melody the way they'd raised their sons in the 1980s, expecting independence perhaps too early and emphasizing toughness over emotional support. "We were wrong," she had said, the words clearly difficult for her. "The world is different now. Children are different, and we need to be different too." It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. There were still moments of tension, instances where old patterns threatened to emerge. But there was progress, real, meaningful progress that benefited Melody most of all. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet. "How's it going?" I smiled as I replied, "Better than expected." They're actually listening to her. Janet had become part of the extensive support network I'd built around Melody. I'd learned my lesson about relying too heavily on any single source of support. Now, in addition to Gerald and Barbara, Melody had Janet, Peter, and Jessica, my friend Elaine, and several other trusted adults in her life. As I watched my daughter laugh at something Gerald said, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Not the vindictive satisfaction I might once have imagined, but something more valuable. The peace of knowing I had protected my daughter while still preserving her connection to her father's family. This was what real victory looked like, not destroying relationships, but transforming them into something healthier for everyone involved.